planners who will provide their investing insight for Massachusetts veterans. We are also live streaming this Zoom webinar on our Facebook accounts at Economic Empowerment MA and at Veterans Bonus. So a quick agenda here. We're going to do some housekeeping for the event, followed by details into the Veterans Bonus Division, and then we'll kick it off to our panelist presentation, and we'll end the show with a Q&A section. Some disclosures here. This is a Zoom webinar and will be recorded. The recording may be uploaded onto a public website for future use. Any information shared through the Q&A function will be anonymous. Please note, however, that the chat record is subject to public record laws and as such is not anonymous. This is a Zoom webinar and not a meeting, so viewers will not be able to see other participants. However, you can ask questions via the chat function or the Q&A feature. We kindly ask you to fill out a short exit survey after this webinar to help us improve our future events. That'll pop up right on your screen. Disclaimer here, the Treasurer's Office does not officially endorse any statements or opinions made by our speakers. Viewers of this webinar should always consult with their own financial advisor or planner regarding any investment decisions. All information provided in this webinar is of a general nature and does not address the circumstances of any particular individual or entity. A little bit about the Office of Economic Empowerment. OEE is a department within the Office of the Treasurer and Receiver General of Massachusetts, tasked with supporting, advocating, and facilitating policies that empower all Massachusetts residents. Our programs serve women, families, high school students, veterans, and seniors. Our priorities include financial education, closing the race and gender wage gap, racial equity, college affordability, and promoting STEM education. I'm going to pass it off to Steve Croto, the Veterans Bonus Division Program Manager, to talk a little bit about the Veterans Bonus Division, as well as the bonuses we offer. Steve?
Great, Jack. Thank you for the introduction. First of all, I wanted to say the treasurer, she was unable to make this webinar today, and she sends her regrets. The treasurer, she is a very big advocate for veterans and veterans financial literacy. And she really works hard. We're one of the only states where there's an office in the state government that looks after veterans financial literacy. And she's the one who started that. Couple of things I wanted to say before I get into my portion is another reason for this webinar is one of the biggest things that we hear, a common regret, is that folks didn't save enough while they're in the military, whether it was 4 years or whether they retired. So this webinar is to help those folks who didn't save enough, regardless of where you are in your life, to help fix that problem. And a couple of personal experiences of my own. I retired from the military in 2016. I didn't have a financial manager until after I retired, and my financial manager was someone who I was stationed with back in Korea. So it's someone I trusted. I call him for anything. I text him. So we have, it's more than a business relationship. We have a good relationship. He's someone I trust and someone I respect. So I think the presenters today will show you the value of having a financial manager. Okay, now I'll get to the veterans bonus. Massachusetts awards a wartime bonus to veterans that lived in Massachusetts before entering the military and served during a wartime period. We have a couple of new bonuses that I wanted to highlight that we don't, the promotion hasn't been out there too much on them. First is the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal bonus. That's for service members that served during non-combat, during non-wartime periods, but served in a combat operation, and they're awarded the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal. That's a $300 bonus for them. And recently, the Persian Gulf bonus was transferred from the Department of Veterans Services to our office. And who's eligible for that bonus is service members that served during August 2nd, 1990 to April 10th, 1991. $500 bonus if you served in the Persian Gulf and awarded the Southwest Asia Service Medal. $300 if you served during that time but didn't deploy. That some folks may have received the bonus already, but contact our office, and we'll check. If you didn't get it, we'll get the application to you. And then we have the other bonuses that we promote. And if you have any questions on that, once again, contact our office. Now back to you, Jack.
Thanks, Steve. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And all the information that you just said, I'll drop links to in the chat for anyone in the chat who's interested. But in the meantime, I'm going to pass it off to Jonathan Harrington and Brendan Sheehan for their presentation.
Jack, Steve, thank you for inviting us here to talk today. Steve, I appreciate all the Veterans Bonus Division does for service members in Massachusetts. I've taken advantage of the bonus program a couple of times myself, and it's really a unique thing that Massachusetts does, and you guys should be commended for the work that you're doing. Brendan, are you gonna share the slides here?
Sure, I can do that.
So I'm John Harrington. Brendan Sheehan is a friend of mine. We're both certified financial planners in Massachusetts. We've been both involved with a pro bono program that helps veterans and currently serving service members with financial planning related questions and advice since the mid 2000s. I'm also in the military myself. I've been in the Army Reserve for over 10 years, deployed a couple of times, and still serving down in Newport, Rhode Island with the Civil Affairs Battalion. So I do have experience on both the financial planning and military sides, and I think I'm able to kind of translate between those two worlds for people that are either coming out of the military or still serving. All right, so we're going to get into the presentation today. The first thing I want to, if you can hit the next slide there, Brendan. First thing I wanted to talk about was this concept of index card finance. So there's this guy named Harold Pollack. He was on in 2013. He was on a podcast. He's not a financial planner. He's involved in like healthcare policy, but for some reason he was asked to give financial advice. He wrote down these 10 rules on an index card, took a picture of it, put it on the internet, and it went viral. I saw it back then, and I thought that it was, really sound advice, and the graphic was cool because it all fit on a 3x5 index card. So we wanted to start the presentation just talking about these 10 rules, and then we'll get into more detail about some of the things that are presented here in the following slides. One of the things we'll focus on today is saving in employer-sponsored retirement plans. So when you're saving for retirement, you can do it in an account that you have created on your own, and that would be like a Roth IRA, a traditional IRA. You can also do it in an employer-sponsored retirement plan, like a 401k, 403b. The military uses the thrift savings plan. They're all kind of the same thing, but they all have tax advantaged status, which means that you either get a tax deduction for making a contribution, or you don't pay taxes on distributions when you take the money out of the accounts in retirement. And for all of them, all of the earnings grow tax-free. These are the foundation of retirement savings. And because they have these tax advantages, you really want to focus on saving into these types of accounts. So the second rule here is max your 401k or equivalent employee contribution. If your employer is offering one of these types of plans, they're trying to make it easy for you to save for retirement by doing all the administrative work of creating the vehicle for you to save, and giving you a set of investment options that they think are appropriate for you as a participant in the 401k. They may even have a match for making a contribution. And when you get that match, it's helping you because it's free money. So take advantage of 401ks when they're in 403bs and other types of employer retirement plans when they're offered to you. The next rule: buy inexpensive, well-diversified mutual funds such as target date XX funds. So we'll get into target date funds or life cycle funds a little bit later in the presentation, but the key word here is inexpensive. So anytime you're paying a fee when you're investing, and that could be an explicit cost like a expense ratio in a mutual fund that you're using, or a hidden cost like you know you hear about free trading from all these platforms now. Well, it's not really free. You're paying somewhere, and that cost can add up over time. So you want to target funds that mutual funds or that have low expense ratios, or low when you're trading. Look for accounts that have low minimums, or no account fees, or low trading costs, because over time, if you're saving money with low fees and expenses, that's going to help you save more faster.
Hey, John, can I jump in on that?
Yeah.
So when it comes to fees and expense ratios, I always try to avoid, jargon when it comes to investing, because people just goes over people's heads. Expense ratios are something that, when you're doing your research on a stock, it's the fee that ultimately you pay to a manager to manage that basket of stocks or bonds. So a mutual fund, easiest way to think about it, it's a basket of investments, stocks, bonds, or a mixture of the two. And you pay someone usually a percentage of whatever the rate of return is, and that's called an expense ratio. Sometimes it's buried. You won't see it on your statement, but you might see it if you're doing some research, on the provider's website. So if you have a Fidelity account, sometimes it shows up on the Fidelity website and things like that. I would say, and John, jump in here if you don't agree with this. I would say that a relatively low expense ratio is somewhere between 0 and 0.5%, and something that's more expensive is 0.5% or more. I've seen them go all the way up to 3%. So there is some variability around that. And to John's point, you want to be biased towards the more inexpensive ones, but there are certainly some expensive ones that have performed very well. And so you just have to balance the fee for the performance.
I agree wholeheartedly, Brendan. Thank you for that.
Yep.
The next point: never buy or sell an individual security unless you can afford to lose 100% of the money you invest, e.g. Bitcoin, meme stocks, NFTs. These are all the rage right now. Day trading. Doing those types of things, in my opinion, is only going to lead to one place, and that's failure. You're not, as anyone that's not a professional investor, if you try to get into, gaming the market, treating it like a game, treating it like gambling, it's not going to help you save for the goals that you ultimately want to achieve, like retirement, buying a house, paying for your kids' college, etc. It says the person on the other side of the table knows more than you do about this stuff, and it's true. So choose well-diversified investments like mutual funds, which we'll talk about in more detail later when we discuss target date retirement funds, and don't try to game the market. Save 20% of your money. That's a goal. You have to start somewhere, and that can be 1%, 2%, 3%, 5%, whatever, but try to work up towards 20%. That's a good benchmark for how much to save for retirement, but it's different for every single person. If you serve 20 years in the military and you have a pension in addition to Social Security, you may not need to save 20% between now and when you retire. It depends on living expense expectations for yourself in retirement, but everyone's different. But 20% is a good goal for most people. But like I said, you can get up to that 20% incrementally. Pay your credit card balance in full every month. You can't save money if you have debt, right? So if you have high interest credit card debt, you have home equity line of credit, you have a high interest car loan, you want to pay those things off first and then start saving for retirement. We're not talking about mortgages and low interest student loans that you're paying off over time, but anything with high interest rates that's like debt, pay that stuff off first before you start saving.
Hey, John,
ma-
can I piggyback on that for a sec?
Sure.
So credit card balances, let's say that the average credit card rate is about 15%. If you are carrying, let's say, $10,000 of credit card debt, at 15%, that's $1,500. Anytime you have $1, you either put it towards your debt, your credit cards, or you can invest it, or you can put it into your checking and savings accounts. I've seen a number of clients, really smart people, who have these big, giant cash reserve buckets. They might have $30,000 in their savings account, but meanwhile, they're sitting on a $10,000 credit card bill. And it never really makes sense to me, because they're making 0.1 to 0.5% in the bank or savings account over here, and then paying 15% over here. So you always, again, to John's point, paying credit card balances, you're almost you are guaranteeing yourself a 15% rate of return, because otherwise if you don't take that dollar and put it towards the credit card balance, and you put it into your checking account or even into an investment account, you're probably not going to be making more than 15% to offset the amount of money you're losing by carrying a credit card balance.
That is an outstanding example of why that makes sense.
Thank you, John.
Make a financial advisor commit to a fiduciary standard. Why did Harry Pollack write this? Because when you're working with a financial advisor, you want them to have your interest first, and that's what the fiduciary standard means. They're doing all of the actions they're taking are in your best interest and not theirs. So you want to ask anyone that approaches you about giving you financial advice, trying to sell you something, whatever, ask them if they're a true fiduciary. And if they answer no, then go look elsewhere for somebody else. And then the last one, it comes from his background in healthcare, but when we talk about like Social Security being a social safety net, you have to think about what you need in retirement. Social Security, I think like the maximum benefit you can get at full retirement age in 2021 is $3,200 a month from Social Security. That's if you were maxing out your earnings, Social Security earnings over your working lifetime. Is that enough for you to live on in retirement? If not, then you have to have other savings to get you to what you need for living expenses. That might come from a pension if you did 20 years in the military. Maybe you're a government employee that has a pension for working after the military. But if you don't have either one of those, Social Security might not be enough to get you there. So that's one of the foundations for why you need to be investing elsewhere. All right, that segues into the next slide, which is reasons to invest.
All right. Hey, Jack, real quick, were we able to load up those questions that we had talked about prior to the?
We have some polls ready. If Eli in the back end wants to bring up a poll. What's the first one you want to bring up?
Let's just see who we're talking to. So we kind of jumped right in head first. Let's find out, ages of people and how they feel like they are in terms of their investing expertise. So there's a poll right up on your screen right now. You can click on the button, and that should let us know in short measure who we're talking to. Are we talking to a bunch of young folks, a bunch of older folks, or somewhere in between? All right. So it looks like somewhere in between. Okay, great. So I think a lot of this stuff will probably, and was everyone able to see those results, or is that just me that saw those results?
We saw those, yep.
Okay. So that was pretty much ages. You know, it looks like most folks are between 30 and 60. The other question that we had was investment experience. So, you know, very basic, you know, beginner, intermediate, or advanced. So I don't know if that we can bring that one up. And if not, then we can just plow right. Okay, there we go. So yeah, what's your level of financial expertise? Beginner, intermediate, advanced. I'm curious to see, you know, if we're talking too basic or talking over people's heads. So let's see where people come on this one. All right, so we got mostly beginners and intermediate, so great. So hopefully a lot of this stuff will resonate with you, especially when it comes to reasons to invest. You know, for the beginners out there, you know, one of the things that that's important to realize is that inflation right now, cost of living going up, is starting to go up. We just got a report today out there that said that the inflation rate just jumped to its highest level in 30 years. So things are getting more expensive. You know, biggest thing is at the pump. You know, a lot of people are paying about $1 more than they were this time last year. So it's really starting to impact things. Not going to get into any of the politics as to why that might be happening. But long story short, the cost of living is going up. And so in order to keep up with that, you can't just have all your money in checking and savings. We call that safely losing money, because if you're making 0.5%, and inflation is going up 5 and 6%, you are losing your ability to keep up with the cost of living. And that's why folks who are on a fixed income have trouble keeping up, because, you know, their pension, you know, when they first get it might be great, but if the cost of living is going up 3, 4, 5, now 6%, you know, they're not keeping up, and that's where things start going south. So first point here, invested money has grown faster than just holding cash. Super important thing to be aware of. And next slide here is a very busy slide, but what I'll ask you to do is pay attention to the second to last column here. So let me get my little pen out. So this guy here. So what this is pretty much saying is that historically, since 2006, large cap, think about that as the stock market. It's averaged just about 10%. And what's cash done over that time frame? 1.2%. So you're looking at almost a 10-to-1 difference between investing in the market, as they call it, versus just sitting in cash. And again, if the cost of living is going up as dramatically as it has been, you're losing if you're just keeping your money in cash. Number 2, Albert Einstein once said that the 8th wonder of the world is compound interest. And he actually went a little further and he said, he who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays for it. And I think that's a really good way of looking at compound interest. So let me explain what compound interest is. So maybe the best way to describe it is think about simple interest versus compound interest. Simple interest is if you get 10% on your $100, you're making $10 each and every year. So $10, $10, $10. So you're going to go up in a straight line. You're going to go 100, 110, 120, 130, 140. What compound interest is you actually make that 10% or whatever the balance is the following year. So for instance, if you go year 1, it's compound interest and simple interest are the same thing. You go from $100 to 110, but the next year you're going 10% on 110, which works out to about 121 versus the 120. And as we keep going up, the simple interest just goes up in a straight line. The compound interest goes in like a curve, like a hockey stick almost. And again, the folks that understand that are earning that and earning that compound interest. And it really is incredible, when you see it. Albert Einstein, again, smart guy, he said it was the 8th wonder of the world. And on the flip side, if you are borrowing money and you're paying on a compound interest basis, then it's going the exact opposite way, where you're losing money at an exponential rate. So that's why you really need to understand the idea of compound interest. Number 3, I think that's pretty basic. You need to create a nest egg for yourself. At the end of the day, Social Security, like John said in the prior slide, it will only get you so far. Pensions are going away. Not many people have a pension anymore. So you can't really account for that. So you need to have money to bridge the gap between what Social Security is and what your cost of living is. And that cost of living, as we just talked about, is continuing to go up. John again talked about the retirement plans. They have tax advantages. It's very important to be aware of the tax advantages associated with retirement plans. So let me jump to a couple slides down. So a lot of people will hear, what is a Roth IRA versus a traditional IRA? And so a traditional IRA, this may be a little bit unfair to say, but it's almost a little bit of a deal with the devil. You get a benefit today, but the tax savings that you have are just deferring taxes. The taxes that are building up, you're just not paying on them until you get into your 70s. Technically, at age 72, you have to actually start taking money from that traditional IRA, regardless of how big it's gotten. And the IRS forces you to take money out. And so whatever it's grown to, whatever your traditional IRA has grown to, you have to take that money out and it becomes income and taxed at whatever your tax rate is at that time. So you get a tax deduction today, which is fantastic. Obviously that's a good thing. The taxes, capital gains, dividend income, interest income, you never have to pay on that until such time that you take money out of it. And most people just let it sit there until they're forced to take it out by the IRS. There are some people that, when they retire, they need to start dipping into their 401ks and traditional IRAs. But for a lot of people, they wait until the very end, which is at age 72. Roth IRAs, on the other hand, is almost the traditional IRA tipped on its head. You don't get a deduction up front. However, you never have to pay tax on that again. So, as I say, traditional IRA, a little bit of a deal with the devil. You get a benefit up front, but you pay for it in the future. The Roth IRA is the ant and the grasshopper, where you take the tax hit today. You have to pay tax on whatever money that you put into the Roth, but from that point forward, if it grows 100 times, you don't have to pay any tax on that. So it's a really, really neat way of investing, and especially if you have a younger person, you really want to kind of steer them towards the Roth IRA, because the tax benefit that you get, especially if you're not making all that much money, is not that big, especially when you're younger and you're just starting out. So the Roth IRA makes a lot of sense. And if you can get tax-free growth for 40 and 50 years, gosh, that's a pretty good deal. And so what you're seeing here is kind of a side-by-side on the Roth versus the traditional. So on the traditional side, if you have $10,000, you don't pay any tax on that. So you fully invest $10,000 into the investment account. If it grows at 10% interest, which would be fantastic, it's not that's a double-digit rate of return is not something that you could ever guarantee. But just for sake of this illustration, let's say your $10,000 grows at 10% over the 30 years, you'd be up to $198,000. So you would have made $188,000 over that time frame. But at that age 72, if you start taking that money out and start paying tax at the 25% tax limit or tax bracket, you're paying a pretty good tax right there, $49,000. The Roth, on the other hand, so if we look at it down here, yes, you put in $10,000, and yes, you have to actually pay some tax on it. So you may be investing less, And so because you're investing less over 30 years at 10%, you don't have as much as over here. But again, this is the big thing. You're not paying tax on that, over $130,000 appreciation, which makes them pretty similar. I think that's a little bit simplistic, but we won't get into the nuts and bolts on that. But long story short, that missing out on the 25% tax after everything's appreciated is really, really a valuable thing. Let's go back here. John had mentioned some employers offer contribution matches to your 401k, 403b. You definitely want to take advantage of that. So if your employer offers a 3% match, put in at least 3%, so that you max out that money. As John mentioned, that's free money. If you only put in 1% or you just forego making any kind of retirement contribution, you're letting the employer off the hook. You want to take advantage of that. That's a very, very valuable benefit to have if your employer is kind enough to give you a 401k, 403b match. I think this is pretty basic. Investing helps you reach your financial goals. And this one's pretty important too. There are some people that get a little disillusioned with the fact that they say, oh my gosh, I haven't saved anything and I'm 45 years old. Listen, you might not retire for another 20 years if you're 45. Just putting some money away now is super important to do. And especially with some of this stuff that we're talking about with employer matches and, again, all we need to look at is that page that we just looked at a moment ago. This is compound interest, and the power of compound interest is right here. That over 30 years at 10%, you're going from 7,500 to 148 or 10,000 to 198. Depending on what you can do with that money and how you invest it. Saving something and letting it grow over that time frame is super duper important. So those are actually, no, I think I got one more slide before I turn it back over to John. Yeah, so this is there's a lot of numbers here. I hope no one gets too overwhelmed by this. The big numbers that you want to pay attention to are the 401k limits right here. Right now they're $19,500. Next year, very important, it's going up $1,000. So make sure that this is around the time that people start filling out open enrollment and start making decisions around how much they're actually going to put into their 401k. Just be aware that you can actually put in another $1,000 starting next year. So that's an important thing. IRAs aren't changing. So you can put in $6,000 if you're younger than 50 years old. If you're over 50 years old, you can put in $7,000. That's pretty important. And then, some people have health savings accounts. So you can put in $7,200 if you're a family, $7,300 next year. Not too many people have simple IRAs or SEP IRAs, but if you do, there are some increases to that as well. All right, I'm gonna take a sip of water and turn the microphone back over to John.
Brendan, you need to teach me how to use that little pen that you have there. That's
If you
very
want,
nice.
I can play around with it if you want.
All right, so let's say that you don't have a 401k or you maxed out the 401k at work and you're looking for some other place to save money. So you get to the point where you're saying, I need to open an investment account. There's some steps you have to take to get there, and Steve and Jack had talked to us about, giving you guys practical advice on how to actually open an investment account. So that's what we're gonna talk about right now. So the first step is you have to have money to save. So that's kind of a requirement to open an account, is have money. The second is, well, what type of account do you want to open? So Brendan just showed you the list of available options. A lot of those have qualifications, like you can't make too much and contribute to a Roth IRA and sometimes a traditional IRA. But if you're under the limits and you've maxed out your 401k at work, well, you can open a Roth IRA and put some more money in there. Or you can just create a regular brokerage account or not tax advantage account at a financial institution and invest in there. So, but you have to know what account type you want to open. Next step is go online. The easiest way to open an investment account is to get on the World Wide Web, go to the financial institution of your choice and set up the account online. It's extremely easy these days. And there's a lot of options out there. I think we're going to show you a few on the next slide. Once you get the account open, you move the money in there. So it's probably in your checking or savings account. You create a transfer from checking and savings into the account, and then the money is in there. Now it's just sitting there in cash, so you have to choose an investment, right? And if you open an account at Fidelity, it doesn't mean you have to choose a Fidelity investment mutual fund. You can choose from any investment that is available to you, but you have to know which one you want to choose. And that's the next step. You invest the money, and then it sits there, and you can, trade it in the future if you want to, select a different mutual fund, or you can continue to add to it over time through a paycheck or monthly contribution. And if you want to take advantage of the power of compounding, that's the best way to do it. All right, next slide, Brendan.
Hey, John, we got a couple questions. I don't know if we want to answer them right now, or if we want to wait until the end.
Yeah, crypto investment, crypto ? Investment. I'm a big I'm against cryptocurrency investing and Bitcoin and Ethereum and all the rest. So I'm not a good person to answer that. I think it's not something you want to consider for the basics of investing.
All right, so we're getting a follow-up question. I don't know if you saw that in the
Why?
Yeah, the question is why, John Harrington?
So it's too risky. Yeah, I mean, it's way too risky, and it's not. First of all, you can't invest it in any, or choose it as an investment in any retirement account, but it's super volatile, and there's a bunch of other reasons. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. The next question is about what financial institution to choose. I think that's on the next slide, Brendan, is it not?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just go down to there. So we listed some options here. I talked to Brendan. We use different financial institutions in our own businesses, but for like the retail investor, like all of you are, the best ones that we think are in this list: Fidelity, Vanguard, Schwab, TD Ameritrade, T. Rowe Price, and E-Trade. The way you want to kind of choose which one of those to go with is, do you have another account with any of these? And if you do, well, opening a new account probably makes sense to do that at the one you currently have a investment at, or another account at. You can go onto all these websites and kind of check them out and see which ones you feel are make you the most comfortable. They're all great. You want to look at, how much does it cost to open an account? A lot of them are free if you sign up for electronic statements. Some have minimum investment requirements, so you want to look at that as well. What are the trading costs to buy stocks, ETFs, mutual funds? Those are considerations. But if you open an account at any of those 6 financial institutions that are listed there, I don't think you can go wrong. Robo advisors. So if you want a little more hand holding, you have some money to invest in, you want a little more personal touch and maybe somebody that you can call and get personal advice for. That's what a robo advisor is, and they'll give you investment recommendations and sometimes offer advice on other financial planning topics, and they'll typically do rebalancing for you, which means making sure that the investments that you choose are appropriate for you based on what kind of risk you want to take. And we've listed a few of the more prominent robo advisors that are out there. Again, check out their website, see what their fees are, maybe do a demo of their service on, through the website, and see what you're most comfortable with, if that's something you want to do. Otherwise, go back to just doing a regular online brokerage account. Did we get any other questions in the?
We have. I'm wondering, John, do we want to just plow through the last couple slides and then just?
Yeah,
jump
we'll go to the questions later. All right.
Okay. How about the thrift?
TSP. So anyone that was in the military had the option of putting money into the thrift savings plan. It's a great investment vehicle, also open to federal employees. So if you're on the civilian side now, you can use it. It's awesome. It has low cost mutual funds that are called the SCGI and C fund. There's only 5 of them, and there's also the life cycle funds, which are target date retirement funds that TSP calls life cycle funds. I always recommend that people use those funds within the thrift savings plan. The default option used to be the G fund, which is the cash fund, government bond fund, which isn't really a great tool for long-term investing. It's the least riskiest, but over the long term, you're not going to get a great return there. Now the default investment option is the closest target retirement date or life cycle fund for your particular age. So that's a great change. The TSP also, if you're new to the military after 2018, you're automatically enrolled in making contributions to the thrift savings plan, which is fantastic. And even if you drop your automatic contribution, you have to drop it every single year or you keep getting enrolled. So that's awesome for service members that enlisted after 2018, because the military is now forcing people to contribute to their retirement, and they also are giving service members a match now, which is also a great advantage. And federal employees already had that, civilian employees already had that match, so it's kind of equalizing it for service members. What if you've left the military and you have a balance in the TSP? You may not even know you have a balance in the TSP. Call them and find out. You can give them your social security number, and they can look it up and figure out if you have a balance. If you do, you have a few options for what you can do with it. You can keep it in the TSP. You can roll it into an IRA. And if you have the Roth option, you invest in the Roth TSP, it would be rolled into a Roth IRA. Or you can roll it into if your current employer's 401k or 403b accepts rollovers, you could roll it into that plan. So you have some flexibility there. It just depends on what you want to do. Again, the TSP has great investment options and they're low cost. So I think it's a great tool. You just want to sign it. If you do have a balance, you want to sign in, see what's into the TSP account, see what it's invested in, and make sure it's appropriate for you. And like I said, I would recommend going into the target date retirement fund that's closest to the age that you're going to retire. I think they added the 2065 fund this year for you young folks on the call today. But and now they're in 5-year increments. They used to be in 10-year increments, but it's like 2065, 2060, 55, 50, et cetera. So again, recommendation is to go into one of those funds. And if you think your particular age group is a little too conservative, maybe you bump it up by 10 years. So you're taking on a little bit less risk. But the great thing is that the investments are rebalanced automatically. And that's the great thing. If we skip forward to the next slide, the great thing about target date funds, like it says here, they're optimized for a specific time frame. The general idea behind them is that as you get older, you get towards retirement, you need to take less risk. So these target date retirement funds, Fidelity calls them the Fidelity Freedom Funds, Vanguard is target retirement. What they do is they become more conservative as you get older, and they're auto rebalancing, all of the funds that are in in the target date fund. So becoming more conservative. People have asked me, is there more risk with only investing in one mutual fund? No, because actually within the wrapper of the target date retirement fund, there's actually a bunch of underlying mutual funds that are all well diversified. So it's not like you're just investing in one, particular segment of the market. It's supposed to be well diversified in large company stock, small company stock, international stock, and then when you get closer to retirement, they'll throw some bonds in there, so you become more conservative. And that's like if you opened an account at Fidelity or Vanguard and you said, I don't want to figure out what mutual fund I want, I just want to go with the Fidelity Freedom or the Vanguard Target Retirement Fund, I'm telling you, you can't go wrong with those. And it's a great way to start saving for retirement. And most of those don't have any minimum, purchase requirements, which is also great. All right, so I kind of blew through that one quickly. Do we have another slide, Brendan? Or?
We do, yeah. I
let's see.
can tackle this one.
right.
So there, as I mentioned, I think we do a great job in our business of confusing the public. You talk about stocks, you talk about bonds, you talk about fixed income, you talk about mutual funds, exchange traded fund, like all this stuff. I think the easiest way to think of a mutual fund or an exchange traded fund, they're very similar. They're baskets of investments. And what makes up the basket? It's stocks and bonds. Stock, very simply, is you are part owner in a company. If you have one share of Tesla, you technically are an owner of Tesla, the company, and you're entitled to some of the earnings associated with Tesla anytime they produce their earnings. And Microsoft, Apple, Netflix, all of those things, they're all individual stocks and you have part ownership. What a bond is let's say Coca-Cola wants to build a plant in Indiana. A bond is pretty much Coca-Cola doesn't want to spend its own money. They're borrowing money from people like you who might buy a bond that says, okay, we're lending you $10,000. It's a 10-year note, 10 years that Coke, you have the opportunity to pay it back to us. And over that time frame, Coke might give you 5% interest on that $10,000 until the end of the 10th year when they give you back your $10,000. That's it. That's all this is. So stocks, part owner in a company, bond, you're a bank to a company for all intents and purposes. You're lending them money. They're giving you the interest, just like, if you have your mortgage, you're paying the bank interest. So what a mutual fund is just a basket of all those. And mutual funds typically are, as we say, I'm going to use my vanishing pen, John, here it comes. Typically they are active or passive. What that pretty much means is the basket of stocks is either the manager who you're paying, that expense ratio that we talked about before, is putting together a portfolio, a basket of different investments, and they're benchmarking themselves against a stock index, like the S&P 500, like the Dow Jones, like there's a bond one, the Barclays aggregate whatever it is now. It used to be Lehman Brothers. But bottom line is they're benchmarking themselves against a gold standard. And the dirty secret in our business is that active mutual funds, more often than not, when you take the fees into consideration, don't beat the benchmarks that they're supposed to be comparing themselves to. So, when you look at this, I'm not going to ever say don't ever use a specific investment. But when you use an active manager, an active mutual fund manager who's trying to beat the market, just be aware that, a lot of times, more often than not, they don't. And if you're paying a higher expense ratio, like we talked about earlier, 0.5% or more, they better be doing it, and they better be doing it on a consistent basis. Otherwise, you should be looking at something that's got a lower expense ratio. So mutual fund, basket of stocks and bonds, there's a manager overseeing it. they're typically trying to beat a benchmark or a market. On the right side, exchange traded fund, think of it almost like a mutual fund, but instead of it trying to beat a benchmark, they're trying to mirror the benchmark. So specifically, if you get into, and I saw that there was a question about an S&P 500 index fund or an S&P 500 ETF, exchange traded fund. What that is the manager is literally buying the 500 stocks that make up the S&P 500. So again, we use all this jargon, S&P 500. All it means is the 500 biggest companies in the United States. And so an S&P 500 exchange traded fund is literally buying those 500 stocks. If we were looking at a mutual fund that was benchmarking themselves against the S&P 500, they may buy only 50 to 100 stocks that make up the S&P 500. And they're hoping that they're buying the ones that are going to be doing better than the 500 stocks that are in the exchange traded fund. So mutual fund, they're trying to beat a benchmark. Exchange traded fund, they're trying to match the benchmark. And so because they're matching it, they don't need to hire a whole big team of people to do all the analysis to try to figure out, what stocks, what bonds should be included in the basket and which ones shouldn't be. So the costs associated with exchange traded funds are typically a lot lower. They're also going to be much more passive because, again, the S&P 500 doesn't change all that much throughout the year, whereas with the mutual fund, they might be making a lot of trades throughout the year to try to beat the benchmark that they're on. The only other thing that I would say, point out between these two is that a mutual fund gets bought and sold once a day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So you won't know, you could buy into a specific mutual fund, but not know what price you actually got it at until the end of the day. Whereas exchange traded funds, if I put in a trade right now, I would know within seconds how much I bought it for. So I know that we're coming up to time here. So I think it's time to open it up to questions. And it looks like we do have a few questions down. Actually, no, I guess we already did that.
Brendan, there's questions in the chat and the question and answer thing if you want to take a shot at some of them.
I can jump in here and ask some questions. We have time for probably 1 to 2 questions. We're going to end right at 1. But we have lots of great questions here. I could start off with this one. Are there any better options than a normal savings account that will let someone have their money accessible?
I mean, when you invest in a retirement account, the expectation is that you're going to leave it there until retirement. If you do take it out, you're subject to tax if it's a regular traditional IRA or 401k, and a 10% penalty if it's when you're under 59.5. But if it's a regular brokerage account or investment account, you can sell the security that's in there at any time and take the proceeds. So it's immediately accessible, once the trade clears. I think that answers the question there. It's not like it's not accessible to you.
Yeah, I think that the question I think, John, they're looking for is there something that's liquid that will make more than 0.1% in the bank that doesn't have any risk?
No. The more liquid, the lower the interest rate, because that's the whole thing, right? Risk.
There are what I would say to this one is there are some, and I'm concerned about my compliance department with making any kind of specific recommendations. But all you need to do is look on the internet. There are some banks that are giving some kind of higher interest on small blocks of money. There's one that there's a bank in the area that for the first $1,000 that you put in, they give you about 6% on that $1,000, but then nothing else. There's another internet bank that pays, I think, 3% on up to $15,000. So again, I wish I could I wish I could give you the exact places, but a simple Google search can lead you to the correct, to the right place when it comes to higher than 0.1, which is what most savings accounts are paying right now.
Excellent. And I can jump in with the last question here. Someone was asking, with the stock market being so high, is it a bad time to invest right now?
I'm gonna let John tackle that one. What does your
I-
crystal ball say?
Yeah, I mean, one of the basic foundational principles of investing is don't try to time the market. So I would say, no, it's not a bad time to invest. If you're uncomfortable with, if you have like a large sum of money and you're uncomfortable with investing it all at once, you can do something called dollar cost averaging, which is splitting it up over the course of some time period, a year, 6 months, and investing it in small chunks. Then you're spreading out the risk of, something happening in the market in one event. But it's always a good time to invest, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would mirror that. I think John's spot on. Like timing the market, just a really quick stat. There's a company that does, and I actually had that as a poll question, but I think we're too late for it to do the final poll. But bottom line is, if I were to ask you, the stock market's made about 7.5% on average over the last 20 years. What do you think the average investor has made? And I would give you 3 seconds to think about it. It's about 2.9%. So average stock return, if you just put it in an S&P 500 fund for the last 20 years, and that includes the big drop we had in the early 2000s, 2008, and 2020, the average stock return on the S&P 500 was 7.5%. The average investor made 2.9%. 7.5, 2.9%. Main reason that investors are terrible at making money in the market is because they can't keep their hands off it. Literally, and I see that there's a question, do you recommend investing in an S&P 500 index fund? I can't say one yay or nay on that one, because again, my compliance department would probably kill me for it. But if you believe in the top 500 companies in the United States making money, then it would be something that you would think seriously about, because you can get into S&P 500 index funds for very low cost, and you're pretty much investing in some of the top companies in the world.
Great. Well, thank you both very much for the very informative presentation. I'd like to thank everyone who joined us in the chat, and that'll do it for Money After Military, How to Start Investing. So again, thank you all for joining us, and have a great day.
Jack, can I give one plug before we sign off?
Yeah, please, by all means.
So as I mentioned earlier in the video or webinar today, Brendan and I both are part of a group that gives pro bono financial planning advice to service members and veterans. It's called the Massachusetts Financial Planning Association. If that's something that would interest any of you, you can get in touch with either one of us. You can Google our names and you'll find us, or send Jack an email and he'll provide you with our contact information. We'd be happy to connect you with one of our volunteers to help you with any questions that you have.
Yeah, we'll follow up with everyone here with a follow-up email, so we can include that information as well. Make sure everyone gets that.
Thank you, Jack.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Jack.
definitely. Yeah, thank you all for joining us. Have a nice day.
All right, bye-bye.